to another discussion of Annex Cloud Market Movers. Today with me, I'm very, very excited to have JP Lips. JP is from Adyen. He's the head of commerce, Unified Commerce at Adyen. JP, welcome to the discussion.
Thanks, Al. It's good to be here.
Wonderful. JP, you and I, we've been talking a little bit about, a few topics, and I thought it'd be great to kind of share some of this with our audience. I guess the first one, and we've been, discussing a little bit closer, and you've got a little bit of a background in loyalty, so I'll start there. Retention and loyalty, it becomes and comes to the forefront during recessionary times usually. Though we're not officially in one this way, it's a challenging environment nonetheless. And so I wanted to sort of get your ideas around what you feel around the importance of loyalty in the next few years, broadly, and maybe retention programs and sort of the tactics that people can do over the next few years to implement as a whole.
Yeah, the advice I would always give is to start with a good understanding of the customer. Now, there are lots of data sources you can use to understand customers, but the most important one is transactional data. What did they buy? And a lot of companies have big gaps in their transactional data. And many companies can't attribute their store transactions to customer profiles, for example, or only a minority of store transactions. Some companies have trouble attributing guest checkout to a customer profile. And of course, as we add more channels with apps and kiosks, this whole environment becomes more complex. So the first thing I would always say is make sure you have a really good understanding of the customer. And then follow the data. I mean, the data will tell you that you have a small percentage of customers that represent a disproportionate percentage of your sales and your profit. Your data will tell you that your best customers often still have a lot of headroom, and not many companies realize that. And your data will tell you that your existing customers are much more likely to buy from you than your prospects. And all those pointers really point towards embracing loyalty strategies.
And that's interesting. So focus on the data, follow the data, try to understand from your customers from that data. And once we start understanding the data, I think the more important question is how do we and what's the right experience for this economy? Because one of the things that we talk a little bit about is for the short term in 2020, you have to be a little empathetic. You can't be overly salesy. You understand a little bit from the data, but the data may not always completely, potentially, at least in the short term, give you the perfect truth. Because you might see a blip. For example, if you're a grocery store, you're seeing an amazing uptake in the short term. If you are a movie theater, you are challenged at this point in time. So that data might, for the short term, might give you a slight blip up or down, depending on what it is. And at the same time, you also want to be able to apply the right experience, the empathy for the customer, but at the same time, you have a business to run. So it's a challenging triangle of data versus customer versus sort of the empathy and business overall. That becomes a very challenging decision-making process for anyone.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And but what's important is to put the customer at the heart of your strategy. And that may sound like a very obvious thing to say, but quite often in a retail environment, there's still a lot to improve on that. And particularly if you look at many retailers being traditionally bricks and mortar companies and then adding e-commerce and therefore becoming omni-channel companies. That was a great development because it enables customers to choose how they want to buy from retailers. But very often those were set up in silos. So different systems, different teams, different data as well, different inventory. And in order to create a customer experience that really is based around the customer, it's important to move from an omni-channel setup to what we call unified commerce, which really is a connected way of doing omni-channel, with systems that are connected and with one single source of truth around customer behavior and around inventory.
Perfect. And, I think just in our experience, it was an interesting time because I think, a lot of companies sort of, I would say, early 2000s, when they were pure play, just brick and mortar, build an e-commerce presence. Then I would say probably in the 2000, 12 to 15, there's a lot of digitally, 10 to 15, a lot of digitally native companies came out, very much e-commerce focused and sort of became fairly big. 2015 to 2020, there a lot of those digitally native companies started opening stores. An example of that was, for example, Casper Mattress, right? They were digitally native, and then they opened stores and started growing their business. And so whether you came from a brick and mortar brand and built commerce, whether you came from a digitally native brand and built stores, you're all becoming omni-channel. Nonetheless, if you're still a brand, you're still selling direct to consumer, or you should sell direct to consumer, given what happened. So unified sort of data presence is extremely important. Yeah, that's something that people have to sort of really keep in mind. But the risks that are associated with not making a change, because I think what we've seen over the last few months is customers freeze a little bit. Freeze in the sense of the uncertainty that's out there. Makes you pause and say, what decisions should we make and how can it be applicable? From what I've seen, and this is a famous quote by Salesforce, is they should have doubled down during the 2001 2008 economies, because when they came out of it, they were further ahead of the competition in general. And so, from your perspective, how do you see it? And when people are decision, a little risk aware and trying to sort of hold off on decision making, what is the risk if they don't do anything in 2020 for making these changes that you're talking about?
Yeah, there's definitely some risk of that, and what I think companies should do is really learn from this experience and from this crisis. And if you think about it, I think two things have proven to be really important in this crisis. One is the ability to connect with consumers. So if you look around you, the companies who had direct communication with their customers, they were able to grow their e-commerce much faster than others. They were able to spin up new distribution channels. They were able to inform their customers when their stores closed, when their stores opened. So just imagine not having that and flying completely blind in a crisis like this. So I think that really points towards a need to invest in those areas. And the other is to really invest in a good technology platform to create flexibility. We have merchants that were able to start taking payments through their call center reps that were sitting in home, working from home in a day through payment links. We have companies that food and beverage companies, for example, because they had invested in pre-order and pay, they were able to stay open. So again, even investments where you're not 100% sure how your payback will come, they will create flexibility in the future to be able to withstand the next crisis or the next disruption.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think digital transformation as a whole, became to the forefront, right? We've been talking about digital transformation for the last 20 years. So, it's been an important topic at the C-level, but just in the last sort of 3 months, the improvement or the sort of the leap in digital transformation has been phenomenal. We talked about loyalty as a part of that digital transformation. You're talking about payments, people taking payments while CSR sitting are at home. That's a big forefront or jump in digital transformation that's happening, and doing so securely, doing so in the right way to stay compliant. That's no small feat, right? So a lot of technology advantages is sort of available to customers to use. One of the other ones I sort of want to a little bit talk about is the re-advent of social. Back when Facebook started, I would say sort of 2010 timeframe, it was a big thing, and so commerce, on Facebook was the term back in the day, and then they started sort of saying commerce on the site, but bring social to your site or bring social to your sort of channels, and then it went somewhere in between the two, and then other channels came out, and Instagram became big, and so on and so forth. With this crisis, another thing that's changed is our sort of way of going back to social, whether it's B2C social channels, the newest one being TikTok that's taking off, or whether it's B2B social channels where a lot more people are now significantly more active on LinkedIn, for example, as a B2B social networks. Social's got a new awakening. What is your take on the importance of social channels as part of digital transformation?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And one of the things that we've seen is really now finally many companies are starting to do commerce through social channels. And you mentioned it a little bit in the past. It's long been a promise. It's really starting to happen now. We have merchants that where customers can connect or interact with store staff through Zoom or FaceTime, and basically have a virtual shopping experience, still get the kind of support from someone in staff. They pay through a payment link, the products are sent to their home or picked up in curbside pickup. So we see social almost like bridging between the traditional e-commerce environment, which doesn't really have a lot of personal interaction, without a need of going to a store.
That's awesome. One of the examples of what you're talking about, I just saw that comes to mind as you're speaking about is upscale brands. I think it was Gucci, and they were doing this personalized shopping experience through a personal shopper in store. So you're not going to a store, but this person is picking up bags, trying them on, and showing to you as a personalized experience. And so a true way of doing contactless and sort of personalization while applied to social shopping in this case. So that's a great example. Great. So JP, at some point or not, whether it takes us another 3 months or another 6 months, we are going to start recovering. We are going to come out of these times, and we're going to start thinking about what to do for the future. As people are building their plans for the future, in addition to looking at data and unifying that data, in addition to thinking about technology, in addition to thinking about digital transformation and social, what are some other ideas that you might think of that people can start thinking about implementing in the near future?
One thing I'm really excited about is this thing called card-linked loyalty. If you think about loyalty programs, we are asking our customers to jump through quite a few hoops. And whenever you go to a store that has a loyalty program, you're asked to either carry a loyalty card, spell your email address, pick out your app, show a QR code every time, even a store you come to very regularly. At the same time, you always pay. You always, if you pay with a card, show your card. So you're asked to identify yourselves twice, really, per visit. And card-linked loyalty means that we start recognizing people based upon their payment card. Really quick, really hassle-free. And of course, you can't forget it. You always pay, and therefore, you get much more data. So that's one trend to really look out for.
Wonderful. JP, this was a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you again for your time. For everyone else, please go to annexcloud.com/market movers to hear amazing experts like JP. JP, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Bye for now.